Hello there, I'm Sarah Harding. I'm the Able Diabetic, and I'm here to share my experience of being a type 1 diabetic and to empower others. I've been using the Freestyle Libre system for blood glucose monitoring for 5 years, and so I've come to rely on the report functionality within the app very heavily. I'm also, in my professional life, someone who works with data a lot, both in terms of analysis and interpretation. And so I feel like I'm able to give a good overview of what the capability within the Freestyle Libre system is. This video will go into all of the different reports and how you use them. So I have a pretty clear objective here. At the end of this video, you should be able to have a good understanding of each of the individual reports that are available within the system, what they cover, and how they are empowering and enabling diabetics to take control of their blood glucose control in a better way. So that's the objective. And this is quite a deep dive overview, so we're going to spend a bit of time on each of the different reports. So let's start with the basics in terms of where the data comes from. In order to use the system, you wear a sensor on your upper arm. I've got one here at the moment. And that sensor collects data continuously on what your blood glucose is doing. The sensor itself, that little white disc, contains 8 hours worth of data at any given time. And so you then have to download that data into some other place. You can either use the Freestyle Libre monitor that gets provided, or you can use an app on your phone. And I've got an iPhone, and I use the iPhone app, which is extremely effective. So you can see there, that's a picture of my home screen, and in the bottom corner, you can see the Freestyle Libre app, which is called LibreLink. So once you've downloaded the data onto your app, it'll provide a whole range of different reports. And what we're looking at here is effectively the main screen. It's the screen that you open when you first activate the app. And this contains some headline information. It's information really that you don't need to go past this information. This is everything you need to know in the moment. And you can see that there are 4 key types of information that are included in this. That have been highlighted through the red circles. So we can see here that the first one is the time and target. So I've set targets for what I want my blood sugars to be, and this is telling me how much time I'm spending in target, and in this example it's 83%, which is a great outcome. The next metric is last scan. So I periodically scan, and on this occasion the measurement was a 7.1. And that is in the units of moles per litre of blood, which I think most of us are familiar with if we're type 1 diabetics. The next one is the average, and that's an average over the last 24 hours. So what the app is doing is gathering up all of the data that's been continuously recorded and doing a calculation in the background to work out taking all of the lows, all of the highs into account, all of the different variations that we've seen in our blood sugars, what that amounts to overall. And this is telling me that for the last 24 hours, I have measured a 6.8, which again, I'm actually very happy with. This is quite a nice example. Below, you can see a chart. And that chart you can see straddling a Monday and a Tuesday, that shows 24 hours worth of trending data. So that'll be from whatever time it is today, you go back 24 hours from that point, and the chart constantly updates so that you've always got a 24-hour view. You can also see on the axis that goes up the side on the left-hand side, measuring from 3 up to 21, that's the range of blood glucose measurements that you could have. The other thing I'll point out is that there's a green shaded area and a red line. And I've preset my application so that the green area is between 3.9 and 9.9, And that's where I want my blood sugars to be as much of the time as possible. So if I'm in the green zone, I'm happy. That's a really good thing. And you can see here that I've gone a little bit higher at a couple of places and a little bit lower. The lower point where you can see the line has gone red, that's because I'm under the 3.9 measurement. I'm below the red line, which is kind of set as a warning line. And that very clearly displays to me that I've had a hypo event. So this one-page view is extremely powerful. It only takes a second after you've got familiar with it to get to grips with all of the information that you need in terms of understanding where you're at right now. So this is an incredibly kind of good summary of all of the different performances that you've had over the course of the last 24 hours. Okay, let's move on to the next chart. So the next chart is the time in target metric. And what this does is to show a breakdown of what your blood glucose measurements have been in terms of the kind of zones that they fitted into. So at the bottom you've got the hypo zone, then you've got the green zone, and then you've got zones above 10, which is where things are not so good. And the objective clearly is to be within the target zone, which is why I've got an arrow here to point out that that's what you're really focusing on. How much of your time are you spending in that target zone? I have defined mine, my zone, as this 3.9 to 9.9. I think that's incredibly standard. That's recommended to me by my diabetic advisor, who is provided to me by the NHS, And I found this incredibly useful, actually, being able to define it and then focus on this particular metric. The key thing is focus, actually. When you have so many different data points to look at and so many different pieces of information, it's actually very helpful to have one metric that you think of as your aim. And I love thinking of the green zone as my aim. I found it much more beneficial than focusing on a number. So this works for me brilliantly. And so this would be the report that I draw upon the most when I'm using the mobile app. So moving on, and I think this is probably the most complex of all of the charts, but it's an incredibly useful and powerful picture. So what this is doing, and again, you can see that you've got your blood glucose scores up the side of the chart, and then you've got time across the bottom, and that's a 24-hour view again. And then underneath, if you look right at the bottom of the chart, you'll see a 7-day, 14-day, 30-day, 90-day tab capability. So if you click on any one of those periods, the chart updates and gives you a different period's worth of data. So I can look at what the average information about my blood glucose trends has been on a 90-day basis if I want to, simply by going to that tab. For the purposes of this, I've chosen to show you a 7-day picture. But it's very useful to be able to kind of go, I wonder what my last month has been like. Yeah, it's been a bit tough in places. It'll be interesting to see kind of what's happened. So the kind of deep dive analytical capabilities are very powerful. But let me just talk through what the chart is actually telling you. So the main thing to focus on is the black line in the middle, which I've tried to highlight with the red arrow. And that line is the average over the 7-day period that we're calculating here of all of your blood glucose. Technically, it's the median average. And that gives you a really good idea of where you're going high and low in general. So, if 1 day out of 7 you've had some kind of measurement which just isn't typical, it'll be factored into the average, but it'll be kind of smoothed out by what is normally the case. So this is a kind of normally the case view of your blood sugars. And interestingly, when you do look at it over a longer time period, the line becomes smoother because it's kind of it's equaling out the highs and lows over time, and that gives you a really kind of much more insightful way of looking at how you perform every day. So that's the line. The blue areas, now technically what these are showing is that the dark blue area is the 25th to 75th percentile of all of the different blood measurements you've taken, and the light blue is the 5th percentile to the 95th percentile. But I think in layman's terms, what these are trying to do is they're trying to show what the range of variation you've got is in your blood sugar measurements. And I think this is really helpful because I've chosen the chart that I've chosen because you can see that at around the middle of the day point, between 12 and 1, you can see that my blood sugars really are almost always in the same kind of zone. They're almost always around a 9, 10 zone, and sometimes they go up to 11 and sometimes they go down to 8, but really, very little variation. However, if you were to look at the kind of middle of the night period, so we're looking at somewhere around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, you can see that my blood sugars have gone really, really high here. And so not much of the time, because this covers all the way up to the 95th percentile. This is 90% of all of my measurements being counted here. But it's showing you that there are times when I've got a really wide variation. So this helps us to understand, the times of the day when things are a little bit less controlled. And it's a very, very good way of getting a deep understanding of how you performed. So moving on now to average glucose. And this is a much simpler chart than the one we were just looking at. Here, exactly the same data, and we are looking at the seven-day view again here. You've got all the capability to go to 90 days if you want to at the bottom. But looking at this on a much simpler basis, here the day has been split into 8 different 3-hour segments. And when you look at this, you've got a very straightforward calculation of what the average is for each of those different segments over that 7-day period. And you can also see that the colouring shows you that if you're green, you're within target range, and if you're amber, you've gone high here. So again, this is a good example, I think, because it shows that for me, over the course of this 7 days, there have been 3 points in the day when I've been a little bit too high. And so I can very quickly understand that that's an area that needs a bit more tightening up, and I can adjust my insulin, or I can get hold of the fact that I've been eating my meals at a later time, or I've been eating less healthy meals, and I can very kind of quickly get to grips with that. Underneath, you can see it also provides the average for the entire period. And personally, I like this because I like having an actual number. It's great to be able to think, right, okay, 9.8, that is okay, it's in target, but it's not really where I want to be in terms of the overall target. I'd rather be nearer a 6 or a 7. But powerful stuff, right? Very clear and very easy to get an understanding of it once you're familiar with the reports. Okay, let's move on now to low glucose events reporting. So you can see this is, I think, extremely straightforward and intuitive stuff. This is telling you what your hypo profile is when you've had low blood sugars. And the system uses the red. It's alerting you to the fact that this is a problem area, but it's using exactly the same format that we were looking at before in the last slide. This is the day divided into chunks of 3 hours, and it's the same thing where you've got the 7-day, 14-day, etc. Periods at the bottom. So it's a very, very similar thing. The one thing that is different is that this isn't averaging. This is a count. So this is saying that in the course of the last 7 days, there have been a number of events, and in this case, only the one. And when did it happen? It happened between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. So very clear information, and just highlights to you what your hypo profile is. If I flip to the 14-day one, it will count the number that I've had in the 14 days, and so on and so forth. So for the 90 days, when you look at that view, in my case, and I haven't got it here, but I'll tell you, there are hypos all over the place, different numbers, and a much busier picture. Okay, so we'll move on from the hypo view, and look at something which is slightly different actually. So over the course of all of the preceding slides, we've been looking at a kind of aggregation, a summing up, averaging, looking back over a lengthier period of time, 7 days plus, and understanding what the overall trends are. What this particular chart does is to only look at the graphs for a particular day. And so you can see very clearly that, back on X day, the 22nd of March, in this case, I had a really good day. This was an in-target day generally. I'm much, much lower than my typical average for this period, which, as we've just seen, is 9.8. And I'm rumbling along quite nicely. Just one point in the day when I went high. So this is a capability that enables you to go back and kind of go, you know what, something happened last Wednesday and I'd like to understand it a bit more deeply. I'm going to go back and look at it. And it's just there for reference. And within the app itself, there's 90 days worth of data at any point, and that means that you can go back into your data all the way back to what happened months ago. So for me, that would mean I can go back until the start of January at this point. You can see that at the top of the screen, I've also highlighted that there are some little icons. And those icons show that there's information in the logbook, which is another part of the app, that tells you that something has happened. Now, one of the things that the app enables you to do is to add information, add notes. And this is showing where you have added a note. And in all cases here, there's a little syringe showing, and that's to highlight the fact that I've applied insulin at those points and recorded the fact that I have. So it's saying the first one actually has a little syringe and a 2 on it, and that's because I had 2 doses of insulin at that point at the same time. I took both my background long-acting and I also took a little bit of my fast-acting first thing in the morning. Then the next couple are my other mealtime, lunchtime and dinner time applications of insulin. And then the final one is my nighttime application when I've taken my long-acting for my overnight bedtime time as well. So that's why I've got those different icons at the top of the page. And you can see that that just helps you to correlate what you're doing with your life with what the blood sugar performance is doing as well. And it's actually a very useful thing to be able to refer to both. So I'll move on from this daily graph and come to a very, very useful highlight long-term headline number chart shown here, which is the estimated HbA1c. And of course, those of us who have been looking after our diabetes for a while will know that this is something that we go and have checked via a blood test, via a lab, calculating what our glycosylated hemoglobin is. And that gives a long-term view of what our blood sugar, blood glucose control has been. The Freestyle Libre isn't able to do that, but it is able to estimate by taking all of that data from the last 90 days. It looks at it all and it works out what that is likely to come out at in terms of an estimated HbA1 score. So really this is just a translation of the average that we will have seen on other screens into a headline number. Personally, I find this really, really useful. It's a number I understand, it's a number I think about as a target, and it's always there in terms of the kind of the pressure of being a diabetic. You're always thinking about making sure that your HbA1 is lower, not higher. That's the ongoing challenge that we all have. And I love being able to just flick over to this report and kind of see that, okay, it's 7.5 and it's been 7.5 for a while, or actually it's just gone up. It was 7.3 not that long ago, so that's not great. It just enables me to have a really kind of good handle on the direction of travel. So I love this screen. I think it's a really, really helpful thing to translate this. The other thing I would say about this is that over the course of my 5 years, I've clearly been able to kind of compare what this comes out at compared to what my actual HbA1s tests have been. And I would say that this is very, very, very accurate. It's never completely on the money, but it's very close. And it's certainly close enough that I rely on it pretty heavily when I look at the reporting. Now, I said a few slides ago that there's this notes functionality, and since I've been going through all of this kind of data explainer for you, I thought it would be useful just to show that this is how you put the notes information into the app. So you can see here that there is a screen that says very clearly note, and it's got some little check boxes on it. and it enables you to check the box. If you check the box, it opens a little menu underneath, and you can record information about the carbohydrate that you've been eating. Whenever you've done a measurement of, done an application of insulin, you can record the amount here, and then you can record exercise, and you can also record any random comments as well. So very kind of comprehensive range of different things you can put into the system, and I'll just show you here how each of the different areas actually looks. So here's the food one, and you can see that you can specify which meal it was, and you can also specify the number of grams of carbs that was involved in that meal. So if you're able to do this, this gives you a really good handle on, you know, not only your blood sugar movements, but also how much overall you're eating of carbs, and when you're eating the carbs as well. I think we all forget this kind of stuff, so it's really useful to have a way of recording it. The next thing is the insulin, and I must say, you know, I'm not very regular at doing this because you know, some of my insulin stays very stable. The long acting is always the same pretty much, and the rapid acting I tend just to be really lazy. But it is a really good idea to just kind of check this box and pop in the fact that for this particular mealtime, you know, you've had 10 units, for example. So that's the rapid acting. The long acting is very similar. You check the box, you put in the number. So there you've got 14, 16 units. And here we are into the exercise zone. So, you know, it's not too complex. It's got this high, medium, low intensity thing, which I think is a good way of capturing exercise information. And it's also got the ability to measure how much time you spent exercising as well. So it's getting quite sophisticated in terms of the kind of information we're looking after. And then the last thing is this kind of miscellaneous other area where you can just write down anything you want. And I don't use this a huge amount, but I do tend to use it when my blood sugars have been inexplicably high for a few days. And I kind of find myself going, you know what, I think that maybe I'm not tip top in terms of health. Maybe I've got a bug. It's quite low level, but it's there and it's affecting something, because that's an experience that I have, you know, not infrequently. So I'll note that down, and that's useful reference for me, but it's also a useful reference for my medical support people. Okay, I hope that overview has been a really helpful one. You know, that's the majority of the information that's included within the app. There's a little bit of other stuff as well, but that's the key reporting information. That's where the data is used, and those are the things that you refer to in order to get your understanding of how your blood glucose is performing. I thought I'd reflect a little bit on what the key takeaways for me would be in terms of how this all works. And I think the first one is that, you know, the sensor and the app, they do a huge amount of work and take a huge amount of kind of pressure off us as diabetics, because the fact that you've got you know, such a huge amount of data being recorded, and you're not even thinking about it. You know, you're wearing the sensor, and you know it will collect 8 hours of data. I tend to scan my sensor about once an hour because I like to know where I am now, and it's, you know, that scanning is the equivalent of doing, you know, what used to be a finger prick blood monitor test, you know, that kind of snapshot view. So I do that now just by scanning, and I tend to do it once an hour. But you know, you don't have to, right? If you find yourself really busy and you're doing something for 5 hours and you haven't got a chance to scan, it'll still have the data. So that's great. And then the app is holding on to 90 days worth of data, and it's doing all of this calculation stuff in the background for you. So, you know, really there's a huge amount of stuff that you don't have to think about as a diabetic, because it's being taken care of by the system, which is great. The other thing is that, you know, although I have to say that my own performance on this is really pretty weak, I do recognise that the data set is massively improved if you can add some of that colour and the extra information from, you know, the food, exercise, insulin dosage that you're doing on a frequent basis. You know, we all know that we forget this stuff pretty much the moment it's happened. You know, I don't know what I did last Wednesday in terms of, you know, the insulin doses that I took. So it is actually a really, really good thing to have that. And of course, you know, if you are varying your fast-acting insulin doses, you'll be able to have an idea that generally you're around a 6, generally you're around a 10, generally you're around a 12. But you won't be able to actually calculate that in your own head unless you're some kind of mathematical genius, of course. So I think it's great to be able to go back and use the app to do those kind of things as well. The last point is that this is primarily about empowering us. It's primarily about being able to look at the data and understand how we ourselves are working and how our lives are going from a diabetic control perspective. The reason that I'm putting this information out is because I've been a diabetic for 30 years, and although generally speaking I think I've been a really capable and able diabetic, I don't think any of it has been easy. And there's a big difference between being on top of it all the time and feeling like you're completely capable of everything, and there's a big difference between that kind of sense and the sense that actually I have a lot of the time, which is that I'm not quite making it. I'm just falling short of where I should be all the time, and I think this system does help you to understand much more in depth what the kind of pressures are on your life, as well as what your blood sugar control is, because you get a really good idea of the fact that you tend to be high because you tend to be working or something like that. So it is definitely very empowering for the individual, but it is also incredibly empowering for the medical professionals that support you as well. I have spent most of my 30 years of being a diabetic talking to people who have to ask me how things are going, because they don't have anything to look at, because all they have is the HbA1c test every now and again. And now I'm able to kind of talk to somebody who can say, look, it looks like you're having real problems in the evening, because I can see that on the chart that I'm looking at in front of me. And so that makes for a much more meaningful dialogue with the people who are helping you to manage your diabetes as well. So that too is very important. Hopefully those key takeaways resonate with people. There are lots of other things I would say about the system. Overall, I think it's hugely beneficial to be using it. So it's wrap up time now, and I'd firstly like to thank you for spending the time to watch this video. I hope you found it really useful, and I hope you learned a little bit about the system and about my experience of using it. I'm Sarah Harding, I'm the Able Diabetic, and there are other resources that I've put together that are available both on my YouTube channel, but also on my website, which is www.theablediabetic.com. Thanks very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again.